Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea continues to see a concerning number of coronavirus cases in the Seoul area. Over 100 nationwide, more than a quarter of which can't be traced. South Korea marks the anniversary of the historic summit with North Korea 2 years ago that yielded the Pyeongyang Declaration. Relations have since deteriorated, but Seoul is calling for ties to be restored. And South Korea's delivery workers end their strike after the government says it's going to send workers to help them handle a workload they say is excessive and unfair. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea reported 126 new COVID-19 cases on Friday, mainly in the capital region. But with the Chuseok holiday around the corner, there are concerns that the growing number of cases that can't be traced could lead to a new surge. Kim Sung-min reports.
South Korea reported 126 new COVID-19 cases on Friday, keeping the number of daily infections between 100 and 200 for 16 days in a row. Of those, 109 were local transmissions, with most of them coming from the capital region. Seoul, Gyeonggi-do Province, and Incheon City saw a combined 82 cases. Local cases stayed above 100 for 3 days following the series of cluster infections at hotspots like care facilities and churches. There were at least 13 new cases linked to the Kia Motors factory in Gyeonggi-do Province, and the number of cases related to Yonsei Severance Hospital has now reached 46. Concerns are also growing as untraceable cases remain high. The proportion of untraceable cases has been increasing for the past 2 weeks, especially in the Greater Seoul area, reaching over 26% on Thursday. The fact that people under 19 years old tend to be asymptomatic is also keeping health officials on high alert. With South Korea's national holiday Chuseok approaching, these factors could accelerate the spread of the virus. As a precautionary measure, the government has been advising people to stay home during the holiday, deciding not to remove the expressway toll this Chuseok. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
South Korea has extended its worldwide travel advisory by another month, recommending that people avoid traveling overseas and be extra careful if they're abroad right now. The Foreign Ministry says the advisory will stay in place until at least October 18th. The ministry has already extended the advisory several times since it was first imposed in March. It can be extended again from after October 18th if the pandemic is not under control by then. The World Health Organization has called the wave of new COVID-19 cases in Europe a wake-up call. The WHO is cautioning the affected countries against shortening their quarantine periods. Kim Jae-hee has the details.
The World Health Organization has warned of a very serious situation in Europe as new COVID-19 infections surge dramatically across the continent. The WHO's European Regional Director said on Thursday that weekly cases in Europe have now exceeded those reported in March, when the pandemic first peaked. He said the increase in cases should serve as a warning and cautioned countries against shortening 14-day quarantine periods.
The September case numbers, however, should serve as a wake-up call for all of us. Although these numbers reflect more comprehensive testing, it also shows alarming rates of transmission across the region.
According to the regional director, more than half of the countries in Europe have seen a greater than 10% surge in cases in the past 2 weeks. France is seeing the number of new daily cases soar, with reporting an all-time record of 10,593 cases on Thursday. The UK, which has the third highest number of cases in Europe, has seen an alarming rise in infections across northern England in recent weeks. Italy, with the fourth highest number of infections in Europe, has also seen new cases rise. European governments are imposing tight measures in an effort to halt a second wave of the pandemic. UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock announced on Thursday that tighter restrictions will apply in the northeast of England from Friday. The measures include a ban on socializing with anyone outside the household and a 10 p.m. curfew for bars, pubs, restaurants, and leisure centers. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
This Saturday, September 19th, will be the second anniversary of the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit in Pyeongyang and the Pyeongyang Joint Declaration. There in the North Korean capital, the two Koreas vow to implement a wide range of inter-Korean projects, including lowering military tensions and fostering economic cooperation. To mark the anniversary, Seoul is once again vowing to continue talks with Pyeongyang. Kim Da-mi reports.
2 years after the 2018 Pyeongyang Joint Declaration, the two Koreas remain deadlocked. And their ties are frostier than ever after the North blew up their joint liaison office in June in retaliation for anti-Pyongyang leaflets sent to the North by South Korean activist groups. In fact, inter-Korean relations have been on pause since the Pyongyang-Washington-Hanoi summit in February 2019, which ended with no deal. Still, Seoul has vowed to bring back the achievements of 2 years ago by taking small steps and is calling on Pyongyang to stick to the agreements they made.
We pledge to achieve mutual progress for the two Koreas, especially in healthcare, disease prevention and climate change, and to bring warmth to inter-Korean relations through talks.
Such efforts also include Yi's recent proposal to upgrade the DMZ into a so-called international peace zone. Marking the second anniversary of the pact, South Korean President on Friday once again underlined the importance of dialogue and encounters.
2018년 저는 평양에서 김정은 위원장과 함께 평화의 한반도를 향해 나아가겠다고 8천만 우리 민족과 전 세계에 선언했습니다. 만남과 대화에 대한 희망을 포기하지 않는다면 우리는 반드시 평화와 통일의 길로 나아갈 것입니다.
And watchers note that improved inter-Korean ties greatly depend on the relationship between Pyongyang and Washington.
Whatever gesture North Korea may offer in the coming months, it should be even function for what's going to happen in the United States, especially with the outcome from the November presidential elections.
Despite the lack of progress, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo hinted this week that talks with Pyongyang are ongoing behind scenes. The North has not mentioned this summit anniversary, but South Korea's unification ministry is urging the North to make a decision and return to open-minded dialogue. The ministry also voiced hopes of holding reunions for separated families whenever the North is ready and reopening tours to the DMZ once the pandemic calms down. 김다미, Arirang News.
South Korea's finance minister says effective prevention of COVID-19 is an essential precondition for an economic recovery. Hong Nam-gi made the remarks on Thursday at a joint video conference of G20 finance and health ministers discussing countermeasures against the crisis. He explained the Korean New Deal initiative and the country's efforts to contain the virus without shutting down businesses. He said adequate levels of economic activity should be maintained based on strict virus prevention measures. The other ministers reflected South Korea's stance that COVID-19 vaccines should be accessible to all as a global public good. More than 4,000 delivery workers in South Korea have ended a strike in which they were refusing to sort packages after the government promised to send them help. The delivery workers say they are overworked, especially in the pandemic and ahead of the Chuseok holiday, and don't get paid for sorting. The government on Friday promised to send extra workers to each company, which will enable employees to start work 2 hours later at 9 a.m. starting next Wednesday. A civic group advocating on their behalf said the government's deal is not enough to prevent overwork, but it's a move in the right direction. If the government doesn't keep its promise, the group said workers could take further action. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for making time on this Friday.
Good afternoon.
Well, the sell-off in tech stocks continues on Wall Street, and investors seeming less than impressed with the signals from the Fed. Stocks were sharply lower on Thursday. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, if you look at the U.S. market, the futures and options closing date is tonight. So that's why volatility seems to be remaining quite heavy. If you look at the overall market, U.S. continued to show declining trend for last 2 days. Dow Jones lost about 0.5%, S&P 500 retreated about 0.8%, and NASDAQ was down by 1.3%. The big tech companies showed quite a big decline in terms of share prices due to dampened sentiment. On the corporate side, the share of the Snowflakes, the biggest IPO software company in history, tanked about 9.6% after more than doubling on Wednesday. This is invested by the Warren Buffett himself. Also, if you look at the CNBC reporting, President Trump is expected to make a verdict on the TikTok U.S. futures over the next 24 to 36 hours. On the macro side, the data were coming in mixed. On a weekly jobless claims totaled about 860,000, which beat 875,000 expectations. But if you look at the housing starts, it missed the estimations and it dropped in August by 0.9%. So mixed signals coming out from the economic front, and also we need some more boosting measures from the government side on the fiscal policy side, whereas the Fed have said that they have doing everything possible, and they will continue to show remain the interest rate at zero rate over the next 2 more years at least until 2023. So I think that we need some fresh news in regards to the fiscal policy side in order for the market to go up, and also we need that the options and futures date to be finished by end of today.
Right. Well, Korean stocks were up and down today. Strong buying from foreign investors, though, for a gain of about 0.25% on the Kospi. What happened in the Korean markets?
Right. I think the biggest booster for the Korean market was because of the foreign investors net buying. If you look at the total amount for the Kospi, they bought about 144 billion won worth of Korean equities, and also on the Kosdaq market, they bought about 130 billion won worth of it. Main reason for that is because won is appreciating quite aggressively even today. It's appreciated by about 1 percentage point, and it is hitting 1161, and we haven't seen that kind of currency exchange rate in a while. So continue to see a appreciation trend is happening for Kospi and Korean won. And because of that, Korean market seems to be reasonably doing okay with the foreign investors net buying. But institutional money continues to be net seller, and that seems to be the case because the redemption is continued happening, where the local retail investors are buying on their own and directly into the equity market. In terms of the macro side, the Minister Hong Nam-gi have said that National Assembly to approve a fourth supplementary budget early next week in order to give emergency handouts to small merchants ahead of the Chuseok holiday seasons. On the COVID front, we continue to suffer upticks in terms of the daily new infections. It continues to remain at well above 100 cases per day. It has reported about 153 new cases, including 145 local infections. So continuation of the boosting measures is necessary. The social distancing is still remaining to be quite there. And that it results into weak domestic consumption numbers. And we need to see export numbers picking up. But if you look at the currency side, it is appreciating too fast, and which could be fairly negative news for the market for the next short to medium terms.
Now, LG Chem, they're going to spin off their battery business into a separate subsidiary that will remain unlisted, at least initially. This is getting some resistance from shareholders, though, who think they'll be hurt by this. What do you make of those concerns?
Right. The corporate governance issue is a very important factor, and always it's a problem for Korean equity market. The South Korea's LG Chem will spin off its battery division, which has basically, they're trying to focus on the EV power market, and basically the inflated value of stocks could be an issue at this point in time. And there's a concern about the corporate governance issues. But LG Chem have said that the decision was made as the company judged it was more now the right time for the spin-off and structural profit making for the EV battery sector, and the rapid growth rate of battery industry is there, and therefore they need to focus on this, and they have said that. And they are they have added that the spin-off will allow company to focus on specific business areas and enhance the business efficiency. And it should be positive for the corporate and shareholders' value. I think that always there's doubt in regards to the corporate governance issue for Korean companies, and we've seen that in many cases in the past, and that's the problem at this point in time. If you look at the valuations and the fair prices, we think that Samsung SDI, which is another competitor for the battery business, looks much better than LG Chemical. But in terms of the share price movement today, we saw the LG Chemical moving a lot higher by about 3.2%, whereas Samsung SDI was up about 1.68%. But that's because we have seen a massive decline in share price in the last 2 days prior to today's rise. So I think that people are still doubting about the corporate governance issue at this point in time. But the fact is that the EV business, the battery business, is definitely very, very attractive sector, and that most of the people will be continue to focusing on this, and we will see quite significant growth in terms of this sector.
All right, Mr. Yu, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for coming on. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.
South Korea's deficit in the trade of intellectual property got smaller in the first half of this year due to falling demand for overseas patents. According to the Bank of Korea, the country's deficit in IP came to $750 million in the January to June period, a decline from the $880 million recorded a year earlier. The central bank explained that conglomerates did not need to use as many patents from abroad because they were producing fewer products. Meanwhile, thanks to K-pop and K-dramas, South Korea posted a surplus of $80 million from the trade of IP in the arts and culture sector. This was the first surplus since figures were first compiled in 2017. And that does it for this newscast. Thank you for watching.
Climate counterattack. Climate change caused by global warming.